Hi everyone, this is Zunker Chapter 4, Integrating Career and Personal Counseling. So the overview for this chapter is address a wide range of client concerns, such as the multiple life roles that each person may have, learning deficiencies, cognitive disabilities, emotional problems, multicultural issues, and social restraints. And we'll define all of these as we go along in this chapter. Historically, career and personal domains were viewed as separate entities, which basically said was, work is work and your personal life is your personal life. But what this book does a lot, it promotes is they're combined. They affect each other. O.C. Powell in 1979 says that occupational mental health blending vocational development with mental health in the workplace. So saying, if you have a good mental health, that means that you're going to also succeed in work as well. If not, there might be work maladjustment, work-related stress, or depression. The rationale for a holistic approach. In the 1990s, work is a core element of an individual's everyday existence. So, for example, when you go to a party and you talk to people who are new, you introduce yourself, usually tell what your name is, maybe if you're single, married, or whatever, but then also what you do for a living. Gives meaning to many facets of each person's life. And many people are very proud of what they do for a living. Unfortunately, there are some people who are not, and hopefully we can help them find a job where they are actually quite proud of it. So holistic counseling approach. We want to define what that means just in case you're not aware. It was mentioned in the previous slide. Before, early focus was on the career choice and the placement, right? This is what job was all about. Now it's concerned about adults in multiple life roles, which is again what this chapter is all about, is that, you have many roles. You might be a parent, a child, caretaker. You might also be an artist, whatever it is that you're doing. You have multiple life roles that you do, things that you do for fun, let's say. Due to changes in the work environment and difficulties of other life roles, you might have work maladjustment, because if you're struggling on one facet of your life, maybe you and your partner are having a lot of fights and are contemplating divorce. So that might actually flow into your work and become work maladjustment. You might want to change careers or transition to something else. You might lose your job. You might have work stress, changing work requirements, concerns of older adults, and then also changing values and interests during this time period as well, because again, you have multiple roles in your lives. Additionally, depression, dysfunctional thinking, behavioral problems, lack of cognitive clarity, basically mean not being able to think clearly, and then also just internal conflicts that you may have that may also affect what's going on in your life. So you can see holistic basically means all the things that, revolve around you as a person. It's not just one thing. Linda is depressed because she has lost her job and doesn't think she can ever find another one. That's what Crumbles is giving us an example. So would you think that this is a career problem? Or do you think this is a depression problem? Or maybe you think it's both? That's something that this book challenges us on, because before we were kind of concentrating one or the other, but now we're realizing it's all interacting with each other. Compartmentalizing client concerns limits our ability to help. So if we as a counselor wishes to help her with her career problems, do you think her depression will go away? Or if we help her depression, would we be able to find a job? Or is it a mix of two? If we help her, then that way she can actually work on all those things at one time. Davidson and Gilbert 1993 said that there's a multidimensional self and that the relationship to the life and work is important. Conclusion is career and personal counseling are the same. So what that's saying is when you counsel someone for work or you're counseling someone for their personal life, you're actually just doing counseling. That's what it's basically saying. The biopsychosocial model. Cognitive science and neuroscience have added to the biological, psychological, and social cultural influences as major forces that drive behavior. So it's not just one thing, it's a little bit of everything. Okay, we're talking about biologically. That means your age, your gender, your genetics, your physiological reactions, which are, your physical behaviors, but then also, tissue health. And then that combined with sociological is interpersonal relationships, how you deal with other people, social support dynamics, you have friends and family that support you, and socioeconomics, again, that is, the social part, and then finances. And then there's the psychological, which is mental health. Are you mentally healthy? Emotional health, again, are you emotionally healthy as well? And also, what are your beliefs and expectations? And really, all of these things combined make you as one person. So can we really separate work out of all of this? Not necessarily according to this book. So an example is if you were to experience a stressful life event right now. Let's talk about it biologically. That is the activation of your neurons that transmit messages to your neurotransmitters to the central nervous system and then the brain to let you know that there's something bad is going on. Physiological response is cardiovascular system reactions such as increased heart rate and high blood pressure. Think about a time when you had high anxiety because of a stressful event. Did you notice or could you feel your heart pounding through your chest? That's what it's talking about. Psychologically, learned conditioned responses such as negative cognitions, self-defeating thinking, and excessive emotional responses. So what that means is that depends on how you are raised. So how you're raised, if you were given a stressful situation, you could start thinking negatively, or you can start to beat yourself up because you're like, oh, why am I in this situation? Or you can start crying or screaming or yelling. It really does depend on who you are and how you were raised. So that part is dependent. Whereas the biological and physiological responses tend to be kind of involuntary. It just happens if you're in that type of situation. Social cultural influence each person's reactions to stressful life events. So again, how does society see that? And then that will also influence how you're going to react to these things. Anxiety and panic lead to long-term effects on one's ability to function in all life roles. So one thing that I want to tell you is that anxiety and panic are normal, natural. Okay, you are supposed to feel those things if there's a stressful thing that's going on in your life. What we're worried about is people who have anxiety and who have panic attacks all the time, because when that happens it does distract you from actually living your life, because you're always your heart rate is always beating really fast. Your brain is always hyper aware of what's going on. All these things, if it continuously happens all the time, is going to prevent you from actually living the life that you want. And note, not all dimensions contribute equally to this disorder or to a disorder. So again, just like anything else, sometimes one is more influential than the others. So that, of course, that's what you need to know, okay? And then also people react differently when exposed to identical events and stressors. So just think about two people, if they were, let's say, stuck in an elevator. One person might be claustrophobic and freak out, while the other person's going to remain really calm and say, try to calm the other person, say, someone's going to come and help us. I have a cell phone. Let's call someone. Let's call 911 so that, we can get someone to come here and help us. Biological is brain function, central nervous system, genetically inherited predispositions to develop psychological disorders. So sometimes we're actually more likely to develop certain types of things because it's passed on from our parents or our grandparents, and stuff like that. Psychological is psychologically vulnerability could be heightened by a severe emotional reaction to a stressful life event, difficulty functioning in a work role that is stressful, will experience difficulties in all life roles, distorted beliefs, poor self-concept, chemical imbalances, and perceptions of isolation from peers. So you can see how wide and varied this section is all about. Depending on really how you are raised, you are going to be able to handle it or not handle it, or sometimes handle it and then sometimes not. Social cultural is what one learns through social contexts that include cultural beliefs, values, and worldviews. So those are things that society will influence you. And so you might see, certain values that might be very different than another country or culture. Anxiety. That is social pressure to succeed, lack of a social support, prior experiences in social interactions. All these things can lead to anxiety, if you can see that, right? Trying to succeed. You're going to have some anxiety because you're like, am I going to actually make it or not? Diminished sense of control is basically when you feel like there's nothing you can do. You feel hopeless. So that means maybe living in poverty, having social inequalities such as racism and stuff like that, discrimination, people not giving you the opportunity because of something that people perceive that you might have because of the way that you look or the way that you talk, and of course oppression. And it affects your self-concept, and it affects your self-esteem, right? All these things will influence how you feel about yourself and whether or not you feel like you can do anything. On the other hand, social support, which is basically like friends and family, is the most important weapon in combating a number of psychological problems such as depression. That's what the studies say. Development of dysfunctional personality dimensions. So there is a figure 4.2 on page 127, and we can talk a little bit about that after I talk about the rest of these bullet points. Development of one's personality typically begins in early childhood. Chronic nature of development is characteristic of most personality disorders, and early detection of these influences that could lead to the development of a psychological disorder is of the utmost importance. So let's review this really quickly. The first bullet basically is saying is a lot of times you develop who you are as a person as you grow up, right? When you're young, you start to be aware of who is around you and who you are when you communicate with other people. Chronic nature of development is characteristic of most personality disorders. So that means chronic basically means long lasting, lifelong. Nature of development and characteristic of personality disorders. It's going to develop all through life. And then early detection, if people can actually see this going on, if there is any type of personality disorder, it could actually be dealt with. But if you don't, you might actually not be able to get as much help and stuff as you go along. Little evidence of success in moderating behavior associated with personality problems that have developed over time. So if you let these personality disorders develop all through childhood up to adulthood, it's going to be really hard for a person to then not see their lives in a certain way, right? So interventions are really, really helpful if it starts early and sometimes even like, very, very young. Here's an example is severe antisocial behavior, lack of respect for the concerns of others, likely to be involved in overt criminal acts, and extreme aggressiveness. And you might actually be working with someone like this. Little or no concern for the violation of the rights of others lead to vandalism, stealing, and chronic criminal behavior. Okay, this is what it's saying is that if this person does have, let's say, severe antisocial behaviors, they're going to do these things because they don't care. Okay. Interpersonal relationships and all life roles are affected by poor emotional control, conformity attitude, which basically means you're not going to, agree with what the law says, and also, of course, understand the work role. Here is a case study conceptualizing concerns in 4 domains. So Irv is a 17-year-old Caucasian male who informs a counselor that he has difficulty keeping a job. Further explanations by Irv revealed that he has a tendency to lose his temper and get into arguments with fellow workers. On 2 occasions, he was fired because of his inability to control his emotions. During the interviews that followed, the counselor learned that Irv grew up in a neighborhood that was known for its high crime rate. His father was a day laborer, and as Irv put it, there was never enough money to sustain the family. He admits to stealing items from neighbors on several occasions, but he was never charged or arrested. He stated he becomes stressed out when thinking about future opportunities. Irv felt that he was doomed because of his background. Irv was able to express himself very well, and it was noted that his achievement test scores were very close to average for his age group, even though he dropped out of high school. The counselor concluded that Irv does not meet all the criteria necessary for a diagnosis of a personality disorder at this time, but does have some symptoms that are troubling. So right there you can see the counselor noticed that there are certain things that are going on that influenced him, his behaviors, but maybe there's actually potential with working with him. So the four domains that the book talks about is career, affective, and cognitive behavioral and cultural. So what does career domain mean? It basically means career decision making, inadequate basic skills, career identity, indecisiveness, poor problem solving skills, work related stress, job loss, school to work transition, lack of occupational knowledge, poor self concept, and then poor self knowledge. So that's what the career domain is all focused on. Let's look at the other ones. Affective domain involves problems often emotionally driven that affect your mood, self-concept, self-awareness, feelings of inferiority, impulsivity, and helplessness. Of those, the vocabulary words, impulsivity basically means not being able to control your impulses. If you want something, can you control yourself so that you don't actually, like, let's say, grab something that you want? Okay. Cognitive behavioral domain includes cognitions and cognitive schemas. Cognitive schema is basically kind of like a map of what you see in the world, okay, that influence behavioral reactions. Again, kind of your values and stuff like that. So cognitions and cognitive schemas that influence behavioral reactions. And then there's also faulty cognitions that can lead to inappropriate behavior. So if you were raised to see certain things react in a weird way, or let's say if someone's talking to you, you don't like them, you punch them in the face. That's obviously not appropriate behavior, right? So that means that you were raised in a wrong way, unfortunately, and so that would be an inappropriate behavior. Cultural domain. That includes level of acculturation. So let's say that you are from another country or your parents are from another country. You can probably see that you, if you were born here, probably just speak English, maybe some of your ethnic background language or first language, whereas your parents might actually speak dominantly the other language, whether it could be Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, whatever it is. So you might adopt certain values in America that your parents might not necessarily have adopted. Okay, so we want to see how much of the Western culture do you have, and then also what your native culture, how much value do you have of that as well. Worldview is weighted, and then individualism versus collectivism. And that is, again, talking a lot about countries. Individualism are people who believe that, like once you're 18, you should move out and live on your own and, raise yourself. Whereas collectivism is you might live with your family until you get married. And then after that, you might actually bring your partner into the family, or you might move to your partner's family, maybe, because you believe that family, having a close-knit family is a very strong thing to have, a great support network. And you can also read more about how these four domains affect IRV on page 130 and 131 in your textbook. All right, the career work connection to anxiety. This is a case study, and you can compare and contrast it to the previous one with IRV. Okay, so Susie, a 28-year-old Hispanic female, stated, "I want to find a different job, something that's easier for me to do." She explained that her current job as an appliance salesperson was not what she liked, and she felt incompetent. Incompetent basically means not really knowing what she's doing, feeling like a little dumb or stupid. Okay. Susie was appropriately dressed and expressed herself well. Susie has never been married and lives with her elderly parents. She has 3 older married sisters who are living nearby, but has little personal contact with them. Susie was considered to be a good student in high school, but a loner. After she graduated from high school, she stayed home to help her parents. Eventually, her parents convinced Susie to seek work, and she reluctantly applied for a job at a local department store. She was put through a training program to prepare her for dealing directly with customers. Susie, however, seemed to worry about every aspect of her job. She explained that that her worries were about making mistakes and if she could meet all the demands of the job. The counselor realized that many workers focus on meeting the demands of the job, but in Susie's case, the concerns seem excessive. Susie's expression indicated a great deal of underlying anxiety that will need to be addressed. There also appears to be a spillover effect in that Susie not only worries about her work, but also worries about other activities and life events. She constantly worries about her relationship with her older sisters. As an example, she stated, "They don't like me. I'm not one of them." In addition, the counselor learned that Susie has few friends, and when she rarely dated, she worried intensely about being an appropriate and adequate date. Susie's world was filled with anxiety, including what the future would hold in store for her. The counselor realized that some of Susie's worries were shared by others her age, but the difference in Susie's case was the intensity of the anxiety she experienced. The example of constant worrying illustrates how anxiety can consume an individual and, more importantly, destroy one's ability to function on all life roles. So if you want to take a second, think about Susie and then compare her to Irv. Irv had a lot of societal issues that was preventing him from actually getting, let's say, the job that he wanted because he lived in poverty and his father was a day laborer, but also not very rich, right? Whereas her, she's a lot more well-to-do, it seems like, but her anxiety is taking over her concerns or her thoughts. Addressing an anxiety disorder with systematic desensitization. So what this slide is about is how to help Susie if you were the counselor. Okay, one of the interventions that you might do is called progressive muscle relaxation technique. It reduces anxiety through muscle relaxation while visualizing anxiety-provoking events. So what you're doing is talking to her about things that happen throughout her day that cause her a lot of stress. And we're going to visualize it, but also teach her how to relax her muscles, because when you're stressed out, you kind of tense up, right? So to be able to relax her muscles. And if she can relax her muscles, that relaxed state of mind inhibits severe reaction to stress. We can also construct a hierarchy of events, least to most intense, that heighten anxiety reactions. And what that basically means is, have her list all the things that she does in a day that causes anxiety to her. Okay. And then from there, we might even ask her, well, what is the most stressful out of the whole day? And then she'll call it number one. And then she'll label the next number two, which is the next list that you'll see right here. Susie has said that her top one is to take the bus to work, then to check in, and then discuss day with work associates, entering meeting room, leader calls meeting to order, discussion of current sale priorities, reporting to the work area, and then again meeting with her first customer. So those are areas that she says she's really stressed out with. So to do a progressive muscle relaxation technique, we might have her visualize taking the bus, we see how tense she is, and then from there teach her how to relax, and how to chill out, basically, so that when she actually does these things, her body will actually already be calm, and that's going to reduce her level of anxiety. Imagine the first situation twice without muscle tension. Stop when they are unable to visualize the situation without becoming tense. Recycle through the hierarchy until they are able to move forward without tension. Then homework assignments such as practicing muscle relaxation at home. Okay, so those are the ways that we would use the technique of progressive muscle relaxation to work with Susie. And also, Susie will practice methods to enhance self-thoughts and moderating self-talk that is demeaning. So she's going to learn how to tell herself that she's actually a good employee, and that she's good, and she has nothing to worry about. And then also to stop talking about herself in a negative way, like, they don't like me. Pertaining to, let's say, her sisters. Drug therapy may be needed as part of the intervention. So again, that is not a bad thing. For some people, having medication along with talk therapy is really, really helpful. And that's totally fine. Okay. Family and other members of the community church provides social support. So we know that she doesn't have a lot of friends, but maybe she is religious. So we can encourage her to participate in church-related activities, and then from there maybe potentially build a support system for her. And that's it.